Fascist. You hear that word thrown around all the time, right? It's probably one of the heaviest insults you can use in politics. But what does it actually mean? It's loaded with history, but it's everywhere today. So in this explainer, we're going to cut through all that noise and get to the bottom of what fascism really is.
All right, so let's get right to it. What is fascism? Is it just a ghost from the past, something you only read about in history books? Or is it something that can come back? To figure that out, we've got to break it down. Where did it come from? What are its core beliefs? And, what might it look like today?
Okay, to get a real grip on this, we've got to go back to the beginning, back to its birthplace, the chaos and rubble of Europe right after the First World War. So at its very heart, fascism is built on this one really simple but totally radical idea. The nation is everything. It's a political ideology that's way over on the far right, super nationalistic, and totally authoritarian. But look, if you take away only one thing, it's this. Under fascism, you, the individual, exist only to serve the state. That idea is the bedrock for everything that follows. And this wasn't just some theory in a book. Oh no. This idea exploded onto the world stage with, shocking speed. It all started in Italy, 1919, with this guy Benito Mussolini. His march on Rome was so effective, it directly inspired a young Adolf Hitler over in Germany. And then, boom. Just a decade later, both of these guys are in charge, and their ideology is about to change the world forever. Hey, and don't just take my word for it. Let's hear it straight from the guy who basically invented the term. Mussolini himself couldn't have been more clear. He's openly trashing the whole idea of individual liberty. For fascists, there's no higher power, no greater good than the government itself, the state. And this is where we get to the big debate, the real core of the question. Is the word fascism stuck in the 1920s and 30s for good? Or does it describe a kind of political poison that can pop up again anytime, any place? So this really brings us to the heart of it. And the debate basically splits into two main camps. On one side, you have the view that fascism was a historical one-off, a perfect storm created by the absolute chaos after World War I. But on the other side, there's the idea that fascism is more like a political playbook, a set of tactics that can be used over and over again to grab power. Let's dig into both sides. All right, first up, let's explore the argument for treating fascism as this unique, specific moment in history, something we can study, for sure, but that can never really be repeated. Historian Jonathan Zatlin, for example, makes this case really strongly. He argues that we should only use the word fascist for those specific movements back in the 20s and 30s. And why? Well, for him, the historical context was everything. He thinks using that label today isn't just lazy, it's actually bad history. And the thinking here is that historical fascism didn't just pop up randomly. It was a direct answer to this perfect storm of crises, right? You had entire empires collapsing, the Great Depression hitting hard, and a whole generation just shattered by the trauma of World War I. So the argument goes, since the problems we face today are fundamentally different, the political outcomes can't possibly be the same. Okay, but what if fascism isn't tied to one specific moment in time? Let's flip the coin and look at the other side of the argument. The idea that fascism is really a political playbook, a set of tactics that can be dusted off and used anytime, anywhere. Philosopher Jason Stanley is a major voice for this view. He argues that we shouldn't identify fascism by comparing it to the past, but by recognizing a specific bundle of tactics. And he says these tactics can show up even in societies that on the surface look totally democratic. So what's tactic number one in this playbook? It's all about creating a mythic past. The story always goes something like this. We used to be this great, pure, powerful nation, but that greatness was stolen from us. It was stolen by them, outsiders, minorities, political enemies. And then, conveniently, the leader presents himself as the only one who can bring back that lost glory. Next up, tactic number 2, control reality itself with propaganda. You split the world into a simple us versus them. Your political opponents, they're not just people you disagree with, they are enemies of the people, an existential threat to the nation itself. And if the leader is the only source of truth, then every other authority, science, universities, a free press, they all have to be taken down. And the third tactic, this one is a truly brilliant, if kind of cynical, flip of reality. You take the most powerful, dominant group in society, and you convince them that they are the real victims.
Any call for equality gets twisted and framed as an attack, a conspiracy to knock them off their rightful perch in the social order. And that creates this powerful, powerful sense of grievance. So, we've got these two big ways of looking at fascism, as a moment in history or as a set of tactics. But if we dig a little deeper into the ideology itself, we find it's built on some really fascinating and honestly kind of bizarre contradictions. I mean, take this question, for example. It gets right to the heart of it. Is fascism about the group or is it about the individual? The answer, well, it's way more complicated than you might think. So on the surface, the big promise is pure collectivism, right? It's all about sacrificing for the good of the nation, for your in-group. But critics argue that's just a sales pitch. They'd say that in reality, it's a deeply individualistic ideology that funnels all power to one leader and basically gives his followers permission to dominate everyone else. Okay, so we've got the historical view, the tactical playbook, and the weird ideological contradictions. So what? How does any of this help us make sense of the world we're living in right now? Well, a lot of analysts like Alberto Toscano argue that what we're seeing today is a new wave of far-right authoritarianism that is very much a global thing. These different movements, while they have their own local flavors, are connected across borders and often share a remarkably similar playbook. Toscano points to three big themes that keep popping up, connecting these movements all over the globe. First, there's the Great Replacement conspiracy theory, which is all about stoking fear of immigrants and demographic change. Second, you see these moral panics around gender ideology, which are used to defend traditional power structures. And third, this war on woke, which is basically a backlash against any challenge to the social and racial status quo. You see the same script playing out from Italy to the US and beyond. And look, this idea of looking for patterns isn't new. The writer Umberto Eco, who actually grew up under Mussolini's fascism, came up with this famous checklist to spot what he called fascism or eternal fascism. His list includes things that keep coming back: a cult of tradition, a fear of difference, an obsession with conspiracy plots. These are the tools analysts use to spot these tendencies, whether it's the 1930s or today. So let's pull it all together. We've basically looked at three different lenses for understanding fascism. You can see it as a very specific historical event, tied to a unique moment in time. Or you can see it as a tactical playbook, a set of methods for grabbing power. Or you could see it as a recurring ideology, one whose core themes just adapt and reappear in new ways. In the end, whether you view fascism as history or tactics or this recurring ideology, that's not just some academic debate, right? Each of those lenses gives us a totally different way to understand the world. So the real question I'll leave you with is, which lens will you use? And what will you see when you look through it?